I want to welcome you to the next in Respectability's leadership series, where we are training leaders of the future so that pipeline of Jewish leaders with disabilities can continue. We are heading into the first of two important webinars on the subject of development, because an important way that lay leaders help is to develop. This seminar will be with Vickie Agrin, who is an expert in this area, and we'll be talking about individual prospects, meaning, fundraising from individuals, as opposed to a later panel that will talk about foundations. Next slide, please, Eric. So a few logistical points before we get started, which will also give a few more minutes for other people to show. We have live captioning and an ASL interpreter for this webinar. If your live captioning is not showing and you need it, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. We are taking questions, so if you have something to ask our speaker, unmute yourself, wait a moment and ask, or put it in the chat box, which we will be monitoring. Please then remember to mute yourself again so that everyone can hear the speaking that is happening. This webinar is being recorded, especially important given that we have a relatively small number of attendees right now, because we see this as evergreen content, and it will be posted to our website by early next week after the captions are cleaned up. Next slide, please. I want to thank all of our partners and co-promoters in this series. There are 22 of them. I am not going to read them all, but we'll be sending you a copy of this PowerPoint. So if you would like to look and see, it's really a great group, and we are lucky to have them. Next slide, please. But I'm especially grateful to our funders that are making this happen. The Jewish Community Foundation of Los Angeles and the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies. Without their support, this series would not be possible. We also want to thank the David Berg Foundation and the Beverly Foundation and the Diane and Guilford Glazer Foundation, who support our general Jewish inclusion work, which gives us the capacity for series like these. Next slide, please. And I want to remind you that there are 4 more webinars in this series, so come and invite your friends. As I said, the next development, then one that is really leading at the next level, but it's about getting jobs in Jewish agencies, effective disability advocacy from the inside, and accessible events online and in person. And then you can sign up for them right where you signed up for this one, www.respectability.org/Jewish events. So I sort of alluded to this already, but the reason that this series exists for any of you who are not repeat attendees is that 90% of Jewish organizations say they want to be inclusive of people with disabilities, and yet when we did a survey a few years ago, only 15% of Jews could even identify a single Jewish leader with a disability. So this series, first we did a series to help organizations grow their capacity. That was last summer. And this series is really designed to equip you with the tools that you need to become a part of that pipeline so that there are more leaders, because there need to be more leaders, or for people to know more leaders. Next slide. Or if that is. All right, so now without further ado, I turn it over to Vickie Agrin, founder and principal of Vickie Agrin Consulting. Vickie, take it away.
Thank you very much, and good day, everyone. Thank you for your interest in nonprofit development. I have been involved in fundraising as a major donor, as well as a fundraising professional for more than 40 years. My primary employment was at what used to be called United Jewish Appeal and is today called Jewish Federations of North America. I was there for 26 years as the Senior Vice President for Financial Resource Development. For the last 13 years, I've had my own consulting business working still with many federations in North America, as well as other nonprofits, both in Israel, as well as other national and international Jewish nonprofits. And the sweet spot of my professional life is working with multi-generational legacy families who are interested in being able to interest and involve their adult children into their family philanthropy. So that gives you a sense of my portfolio of responsibilities. And today it is my great pleasure to talk to you about fundraising in nonprofit organizations. I'm thrilled that you're interested in doing good and perhaps even becoming a fundraising professional, which today offers six-figure salaries and many opportunities for decision-making, leadership, management, and fundraising to help special organizations. You'll also have the opportunity to work with the most generous people in the world who share your interest and your passion. And I hope whether you decide to become involved as a lay leader or as a fundraising professional, you will all consider this opportunity to be able to do good. Nonprofit organizations are mainly about change, transformation, problem solving, improvement, doing good in this world. There are in the United States today 1.8 million nonprofit organizations. They're really an essential part of the social service industry in America, and they are a primary partner to the government. It allows the government to have a group of nonprofit organizations partner with them to do good, to provide services, and to help people throughout the United States. Whether our taxes are offering some of these services, or whether a nonprofit organization is partnering with the government or working independently to offer some of these services, our country is better resourced because we have nonprofit organizations. They employ millions of communal service workers, and they engage millions of volunteers and leaders. In 2018, which is the last year for which we have what I would call more normal results from fundraising. So in 2018, these 1.8 million nonprofits in America raised a total of $427 billion. $427 billion, which was put into the service of citizens throughout America in many different ways. In fact, the truth is that philanthropy and fundraising in nonprofits has become very much big business because of the critical role that nonprofits play in America, and because it fills the gaps that the government can't afford to support. I hope that all of you participated in the June 24th session offered by Respectability on how nonprofits worked. I watched it myself and I was very impressed with that presentation. If you didn't have a chance to see it, I hope you'll back up and take a look at it because it's been taped, I believe. It gives you a great overview of how nonprofits work. I'd love to know from you a nonprofit, one or two, that you are currently involved with or interested in. If you could either open your mic and tell me about a nonprofit that you work with or you're interested in, or you could write the name of that nonprofit in the chat and we could read it out. So take a moment, think about a nonprofit that you're interested in or you're involved with, and please share with us the name of that nonprofit. And if nobody opens their mic, I'll have to call on Dana Rubin because I know her and I can depend on her always to be a vocal participant. So Dana, come on, tell us.
I was just writing in the chat, but sure. I work at Jewish Family and Children's Service of Minneapolis, and we have a large inclusion program called Caring Connections. The staff person from that program is actually the national chair of the NJHSA Inclusion Committee, which is the National Jewish Human Service Network of Agencies. So she had sent me this information. I thought it was great to kind of be in partnership with her and to hear about this a little bit more. And of course, I know Vickie and have known Vickie a long time and was excited that she was presenting this. So I wanted to be a part of it today.
Thanks, Dana. Well, the rest of you, anyone else, can you offer then?
So I have
Please,
to give a
go
shout
ahead.
out to our fellow Nicola Larsh, who just put respectability in the chat, and thank you for that, because we are in fact a nonprofit organization.
And I can add to that too. I'm involved with Kesha in Chicago.
Great, that's a great organization.
And Erica Abbott, you have something to offer.
Yeah, actually, aside from respectability, who I've been working with for the past year, I used to be involved with Hillel, and I used to be involved with not only Hillel, but the JCC right near me, what we would call, I guess today, the I'm not sure if the Jewish Community Centers still exist.
Oh yeah,
but I was definitely a part of that. So
great. In fact, somebody wrote in chat that they're involved with the Meyerson JCC in Cincinnati, which is a fabulous JCC. If you're ever in Cincinnati, it's worth visiting it. It has one of the most professional sound systems and auditoriums for programs that I've ever seen. It's just a very smart JCC.
That is true.
Anybody
I lectured
else?
in that auditorium. It was quite an experience. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Really state-of-the-art stuff. Who else could mention a nonprofit that they've been involved with or they're interested in?
So when I was in New York prior to moving to LA, I worked for a nonprofit called the Young Adult Institute, which helps people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They have a number of group homes that provide, independent living services, and they're a wonderful, wonderful organization that does a lot of great work. They also do advocacy where they bring their residents to Albany, New York, to lobby in the capital of New York.
Great. Anyone else wants to add? Please, Erica, again, please.
Very briefly, my first rabbi, Joy Levitt, now is the executive director of the Manhattan Meyerson JCC.
Yeah,
So,
great.
Yeah,
There are so many opportunities to follow your own passion and become involved with other volunteers or with professionals in being able to do good together. And so I really recommend nonprofit life for an opportunity to share values with other people that care about the same things that you do. There are so many large nonprofits raising very significant dollars in the United States. Among one of the largest is United Way. United Way raised $4.2 billion in 2018, gifts of all sizes. Catholic Charities is one of the largest nonprofits in America, raising $4.5 billion each year. As you're well aware, healthcare systems like Sloan Kettering that raised in 2018, $5 billion. And universities and colleges are among the largest fundraising producing nonprofits. It's really quite impressive to see how much money is raised to be able to provide goods and services to the citizens of the United States. Funds pay for programs, materials, equipment. They pay for buildings and operating costs. And of course, those operating costs means paying for employees, for the space they work in, for insurance, everything that you can possibly imagine. Most of the nonprofit funding in the United States comes from individuals, as opposed to foundations or corporate sponsors or endowments. Usually the majority of the funds that are raised each and every year come from individual donors, donors that contribute as small as $1 to donors that are literally contributing millions of dollars each year to their favorite nonprofit. Donors contribute for operating expenses, which is very precious dollars to every nonprofit, because it allows us to pay our employees, it allows us to run the internal wiring of the nonprofit to make services possible. So operating expenses are a big part of what's funded. Capital expenses are also raised through fundraising dollars. And those capital expenses build buildings. They pay for furnishings. They pay for equipment. And I know you've heard about planned gifts, like donor advised funds or endowments, which include funds that are invested and for which the nonprofits receive interest that they spend and use for services that they provide. And there are also a number of funds raised for specific programs and services through directed gifts, where someone may name a program for their family and pay for the expenses that are incurred from that program. The goal of development, the goal of fundraising is always the same. And that goal is to do more, to meet more needs, to help more people by attracting and retaining more donors, and by expanding and maximizing donor giving to capacity. We are always in each of our nonprofits hoping that we can find major donors giving us very large donations year after year after year to help sustain our nonprofit organizations. And much of the work of fundraising is the work of attracting and engaging those prospects and donors in our work. So how do nonprofits raise money? I'm going to ask, who am I going to ask? I'm going to ask Eric if he will share the screen with you and show you a list of the ways to raise money from the least successful to the most successful on this list. Looking top down at the least successful way to raise money, all the way down to the most successful, you will see that each item in the list is more and more personal as you go to the bottom. When you look at the least successful way to raise money for a nonprofit, it's through advertisement. Even if you're placing an ad, in the Sunday New York Times, there are so few people that will take advantage of the message they see and respond by sending money. In fact, I only wish that people would line up outside the doors of nonprofits with their checks in hand and simply give them to us. but it is a much more sophisticated process that is needed to raise maximum dollars. More sophisticated than an ad that simply goes out to the public is e-philanthropy. When we send an appeal for money directly into somebody's email mailbox, it is one-on-one. It is reaching from the organization directly to the prospect or donor, but it is, again, a very anonymous way to work. Perhaps you hear my assistant. She's barking to get our attention. Working down this list from ways to raise money from the least to most successful. Least successful is an ad. Next is e-philanthropy, a message right into your mailbox, even as though it is directly from the nonprofit, directly to you. Next in being successful is phone, where you are literally ear to mouth. There's a connection one-on-one between one human being and another, but it's telephonic. And it allows for the prospect or the donor on the other end of the phone to be doing many other things while they're talking to you. And it is simply not personal enough to raise maximum dollars. We find fundraising taking place in events around the country. You remember events back in the day when we used to come together in rooms and eat chicken salad together? Well, I'm sure we're just about to find that there are going to be events throughout the United States offered by many, many nonprofits that will bring people together and create a community of concerned citizens around a passion project. And those events build community. They build a sense of cohesiveness for the nonprofit among those who attend. It's also a way to more effectively raise money because the messaging is in person, where you can literally see the messenger. And the events create their own environment, their own spirit, and they can move people to make very nice contributions. Even more effective than events is Parlor Meetings, kind of an old world name for the opportunity to come together in someone's home or in someone's boardroom, a smaller group of people who are interested in the nonprofit, who may be asked during that time together to consider making a contribution. And because there is an element of sociability, of being together with people that share your values, Parlor Meetings can be a very good way to raise money. The next on the list is a caucus, where you literally come together in a group and you ask people to consider making a contribution and announcing that contribution to the rest of the group. A caucus, just like a political caucus, asks people to step up and say something about how they feel about the organization, the needs, the services that are provided, and to suggest what they are willing to do. Without
Vickie,
question.
if I could jump in for
Yes,
just a
go
moment.
ahead.
Erica Abbott has put in the chat, and I think we can combine some of these questions and answer them. Sort of the combined question of why we are offering this topic, and that I'll give the short answer to because that's sort of my wheelhouse, and say that the only way organizations fundraise, Erica, is if everyone contributes something, their time, their talent, their efforts, their thoughts, which is why it's not the way we think about it to say, isn't there someone else who's going to be doing it? Because the answer is everybody's got to do it if the organization stays afloat, which I think folds into your next question, which we'll let Vickie speak to, which is how can I help if I don't have financial resources of my own to contribute? I'm sure Vickie has a great answer for that. So Vickie.
Everyone has a contribution to make, number one. And yes, time, talent, ties, as well as treasure, the 4 T's are all things that nonprofits need and respect. They need people who have the ability to contribute their time to actually help They also need people that have connections to others, that have social contacts that they can reach out to and bring to the nonprofit to be helpful. Even if you feel you can't make a large donation, everyone can make a donation that is meaningful to them, whether that's $10 or $180 or $10,000. Each of us decide for ourselves what is appropriate and what is meaningful, and what we can do from the discretionary income at our disposal. Some of us have a lot more of that than others, but the goal here is really for everyone to be all in. The amount of the gift does not matter as long as it matters to you. As long as it's a meaningful amount for you that says to you, this is a philanthropic priority for us, a philanthropic priority for me. This is meaningful. This amount of money is meaningful. We're talking about ways to raise maximum dollars. And I said to you in looking at this slide that really the way to raise maximum dollars from an individual prospect or donor is in a face-to-face conversation, one-on-one. It is much harder to say no face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball, and it is much more personal. For us in America, money is a very personal topic. And how we spend our discretionary funds beyond the dollars that we've already committed to meet our monthly nut. We know how much it costs us for our rent. We know how much our cell phone costs, how much our car costs. We have certain non-negotiable expenses that we know we are responsible for every single month. What is left over after that non-negotiables is our discretionary funds. Some of us like to spend our discretionary funds on vacations or on eating out or on a new pair of shoes. And some people also put among the items that are important to them in the spending of their discretionary funds, philanthropy, finding that passion project where they feel they can make a contribution of time, of talent, of ties, and of treasure to help that nonprofit do more than it was able to do before. So we looked at this list of ways to raise maximum dollars from the least personal to the most personal. And now I would like to move from that. You can take that slide off the screen, please, Eric, if you will, to talk a little bit about the business of fundraising. Fundraising is a people business. It's powered by professional fundraisers. Sometimes we call them frontline fundraisers, people that are actually going out, meeting with donors and prospects and asking them to consider making a gift to our nonprofit. But the truth of the matter is that fundraising takes a village. I like to say it's an all skate. Everybody at the nonprofit, even if their title and responsibility doesn't include development or fundraising, is actually in the fundraising business, from the person that answers the phone at the nonprofit to the person in the stockroom in the nonprofit. Anyone who engages with prospects or donors is really representing the nonprofit that they work for, and they can make a huge impact in the mind of that prospect or donor by the way in which they comport themselves, by the way in which they talk positively about the good work that their nonprofit does. And so everybody has the opportunity to influence the bottom line of fundraising. And then there are those that are literally professional development people, professional fundraisers. And as I said to you in the beginning, They are often among the best compensated professionals at a nonprofit. It used to be back in the, go ahead. Somebody's.
Sorry, I just have a question.
Go ahead.
This is Nicole. So I was just wondering, let's say like someone thinks their contribution, whether it's like financial or volunteering, whatever they have to give is too small that it won't make a difference. So how do you like go about changing that mindset? Because I feel like some of the time we were talking about how really like anything helps, whether it's financial or like you're volunteering, et cetera. But I feel like sometimes people think that they don't have the ability to make an impact.
And I would say quite the opposite. Everyone has the opportunity to make an impact in a nonprofit. There is no gift that is too small. There is no time that is not enough. Simply showing up, being present, caring, and displaying that caring counts. What every nonprofit is trying to do is to create a community of interested citizens. And that community of interested citizens provide service, they provide engagement, they provide outreach to other prospects and donors, they provide funds. There are so many different ways in which you can make a contribution that simply being there, raising your hand, saying, count on me, I'm here for you, matters. It matters greatly. I want to come back to talk about professional fundraisers and their educational backgrounds. What brings somebody into professional fundraising? Well, I can tell you that maybe as long as 30 years ago, almost every professional fundraiser that I'm aware of was a communal service educated employee. They were often social workers because fundraising used to be considered community building, community organization. Today, now that fundraising is considered a profession and it is such big business, when you think of an industry that is raising $427 billion a year, you can see that this is truly big business. And as a result, we no longer find that most of the fundraisers in nonprofits necessarily come from a social work background. They come from business, they come from psychology, they come from law. They literally come from every walk of life. They come right from college into nonprofit leadership and management. So it is no longer about being a social worker. It is instead about having great people skills, being articulate, being passionate about the cause you're choosing to serve, and it's about good management of people skills. I want to make note that today, especially, the demand for professional development people and frontline fundraisers way out exceeds the supply. In other words, we don't have enough. We need more people in development, in all levels of development. And I want to talk about what some of the opportunities are in development, because it's not only being a frontline fundraiser, it's also working with groups of people. It might be the women's division of your nonprofit. It might be the young leadership group of your nonprofit. There are all kinds of segments of the community that various fundraisers can work with, and to be able to make the nonprofit relevant to that group and to engage them in being involved in the nonprofit and giving and raising money from the nonprofit. So there's all kinds of professional opportunities, and there's an equal number of volunteer opportunities. Volunteers for leadership. In other words, to chair a committee, to be the fundraising chairman, to sit on the board. In fact, if you attended the last session that Respectability offered on how nonprofits work, you heard a lot about what it means to sit on a board of a nonprofit. It is a great honor to be a board member at a nonprofit. It means that you are sharing your social capital with that nonprofit. You are sharing yourself with them, and you're also getting the credibility and the ability to put on your own resume that you sit on that board. That raises your profile in the community. It gives you social capital at the same time that you lend your social capital to that nonprofit by saying, I have a circle of friends that I believe I can help bring into this nonprofit. John, you raised your hand. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Please.
So when a nonprofit is looking to raise funds, this is kind of going back to the face-to-face method and the different methods we were talking about. So should a nonprofit only aim to try to use that face-to-face method, or would it be more advantageous for them to try a mix of the different methods?
That's a great question. I talked to you about the ways to raise money from the least to the most effective and successful. We use all of those methods. And we need to have a variety of strategies, of ways to engage people so that ultimately they may want to make a philanthropic commitment to that nonprofit. All of the ways we engage people, from phone-a-thons to programs to events to e-philanthropy, all of the ways we message people about the value of our nonprofit are different ways to engage them. And as I will explain in a minute, we use different methodologies for different groups of people, mainly because we want to use the most time-intensive methodologies on those group of donors and prospects that will be most profitable for us. We have to decide the time allocation that we can give to each of the activities that we're talking about here, and that will allow us to maximize our results. In large, sophisticated fundraising operations, we have well-organized and managed systems, and nonprofits take their total list of donors and prospects, and they organize that list of donors into segments, into different groups, so that they are able to serve each of those groups of prospects and donors in different ways to maximize their connection to the nonprofit and the dollars that they get. I'm going to ask Eric again to do a screen share so I can show you what the segments typically look like. Okay. All donors and prospects are organized into segments, typically by dollar level. Most organizations have 3 categories of donors. They have major gifts, they're top donors, and depending on the organization, some organizations think that their top donors are donors at $10,000 a year and more. Some organizations, $1,000 is a major gift. This is the group of people, of donors for your nonprofit that are giving you the maximum number of dollars, the total, the largest gifts. So there is a top gifts, a major gifts level. Then there's a mid-level. The mid-level might be in a large nonprofit, those giving between $1,000 and $9,999. And finally, the community level, the grassroots level, those donors that are giving anywhere from $1 to $999. These are 3 categories by dollars of donors, each category served differently. So if you look back at the top of the list that you see on your screen, you see that in major donors, we use a donor management system, something called Moves Management. It's based on relationship-based fundraising. And basically, it means that for the largest donors to our nonprofit, we take a very personal view. We try and get to know all of those donors, and we try to expand and maximize their giving to our nonprofit in a variety of different ways. Major gifts usually consists of 20% of our donors who are giving 80% of the dollars. It's only 20% in terms of the number of donors, but they are typically responsible for contributing 80% of the dollars. So obviously, this is where nonprofits need to focus on major donor, major gifts, prospects, and donors. The mid-level of donors, 1 up to 10,000, usually are organized in groups: women, young leadership, maybe trades and professions like a doctor's division or a lawyer's division. And this is a development kind of level where you are trying to engage people that fall into this level with others like themselves to become advocates for your nonprofit. They're giving you $1 to $10,000 or your mid-level of donors, very important. This is often the level where you grow them into major donors. And then you have the community level. Community level, that's where you're doing direct mail, e-philanthropy, phone-a-thons, and large events. And you know that those are the least effective ways to raise money. But the reason we use those kinds of strategies at the community level is because this is where you have 80% of your donors giving only 20% of the money. This is the key premise of why we invest in major gifts and major donors, giving us 80% of the money, and yet they are a smaller group of people, therefore much easier to work with, and for which we can do a much more personal kind of involvement. Any questions about these segments?
Yes. I would like to ask, how, other than just developing a relationship with them, how would you turn a smaller donor into a major gift donor?
I would turn a smaller donor who has the ability to be a major donor into a much larger donor to my organization by getting to know them. I would develop a relationship with them, and I would try to cultivate their involvement with my nonprofit before I even ask them for money. I want to know, why are they interested in my nonprofit? Typically, it's because of something personal and typically something in their family life. It could be something else, but mainly we find that the interest comes from something that's happening in their own personal life. I want to know what that is and how we can be helpful to this prospect or donor. How can we involve them more? Would they like to sit on a committee? Is this someone that I want to cultivate to be a board member? Do I want to introduce this donor to some of our other donors who are even more generous donors than the first guy, so that they can help influence them? I want to bring the high potential major donor closer and closer to my organization. I want them to meet recipients. I want them to meet the management. I want them to know the CEO. I want to build a sense of confidence about how we use funds. I want to engage them in the work. The closer we can bring a prospect and donor to the work that we're doing, the greater their gift. Let's take this slide off the screen. So I can simply say to you that the work of fundraising is getting to know the most well-resourced and generous people and asking them to become closer to us and more involved with our work, because we know that involvement encourages fundraising. We want people at all levels of giving. Even someone that is giving a $10 gift, because that is a good and meaningful gift for them, can do so much good for our nonprofit by engaging others, by being an ambassador in the community for the work that we're doing and talking about the good work that we're doing. We need as many people as possible to be not only participants, but also to be funders. I want to show you one more slide before we close here, and actually two more, but I want to show you one more very quickly about the 3 things that contribute to the most successful major gifts solicitations. That is, number 1, face-to-face conversations. If you really want to make a difference, you need to speak to prospects and donors, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, to convey the importance of the organization you represent and how they can make a difference. The second hallmark of success in good major gifts fundraising is asking people if they would consider a specific amount. Now, you notice that I put the word consider in boldface. That's because we would never tell somebody what to give, but because we make a gift ourselves, feel pretty comfortable being asked to say to someone like John, I wonder if you would consider a gift to respectability of $180 this year. Now you notice I only asked if he would consider that possibility. That's easy to say no, and it's also easy to say yes. And then I asked John for a specific amount. Would he consider a gift of $180? The reason I do that is because nobody knows what the appropriate number might be. And to suggest an amount that would be meaningful to the nonprofit and would be within the ability of the donor makes it much easier. How do we know how much to ask for? Well, the rule of thumb is this. We ask what would and could a donor give if inspired. So I say to myself, John, what could, in other words, what do I think he has the ability to give? And the inclination, what would he give if I were to inspire him? What is his capacity giving to my organization? Now, how do I know that? Because I look at what he's given to us in the past, or I look at what he's given to other organizations because I type his name into Google and I see he's connected to other organizations, or because we have a specific program at $180 and I think he'd really like it. So asking people, would you consider this specific amount, is very important to the success of the solicitation. And finally, the third thing that is important is that each of us, when we're asking people to consider making a gift to our nonprofit, have an obligation to tell the donor why. Why are we asking them to consider giving this amount? What will that money do? Why do we need it? Everybody needs to be able to make a clear, concise, and compelling case for giving to those people they're asking to consider making a gift to their nonprofit. A clear, concise, and compelling case for giving. Because time is short, I want to show the last slide to you, please, and then see if you have any questions. This first statement is so true. The single most important characteristics of the most effective organizations is the quality of their lay and professional leadership. A nonprofit that has a high quality professional CEO and campaign professional, together with a great chairman of the board, people that are known in the community for their moral and ethical standards, for values that resonate with donors. We want those people leading our nonprofits, lay and professional. I would also say to you in closing that the messenger is as important as the message. That brings it back to you, the volunteer or the donor or the professional. It's that you said what you said that makes all the difference. The messenger, who you are, what you care about, the way in which you are able to articulate that need makes all the difference. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Nonprofit is really about passion projects, about things that need to get done in society that we feel passionately about doing and about helping to get done, because enthusiasm and passion are contagious. We hope that we can awaken our community, our friends, our society to doing good together. There is so much that we can do to improve the lives of our citizens, our friends, our communities, our families through nonprofit involvement. And I hope that you will consider how you can be involved with a nonprofit that is working passionately about something you care about as either a professional or a lay leader. Not only do we need you, we want you, and we want to welcome a diverse and inclusive group of people, men, women, to our nonprofits to work together with us, because it's always better together.
I really do have to bring us to our concluding remarks now, so maybe folks can send further questions to Respectability, and we'll see about getting you answers afterward. I really want to thank Vickie. I almost feel bad to have to speak after such an inspiring ending, because I would love to end it on that note, but there are a few things that I need to share with you as we close. It was really wonderful. I want to first share, for any on the call who don't know about our National Disability Speakers Bureau Jewish Division. Some of you on the call are actually members of said bureau, but what it does is it helps to bring the voices and training knowledge of Jews with disabilities to Jewish organizations. If you are a person who is at that stage of your career where you're trying to figure out what you want to do, and some of what Vickie said or some of what the rest of our previous sessions have said have made you interested in being a nonprofit professional, and you are a person with a disability who is a senior in or has completed college, then we encourage you to apply to our National Leadership Program. Several National Leadership Fellows, including John and Nicole and some of the folks on this call are National Leadership Fellows, but we recruit every third of the year for a new cohort. You can find out more at respectability.org/about-us/fellowship/Jewish Inclusion Fellowship. And as I say every time I'm giving this spiel, we need to work on shorter URLs at Respectability. Next slide, please. So I already talked about the upcoming webinars during my introduction. I'm not going to reread their names, but they are there. And again, we encourage you to register. Really, this one was fantastic. So are the others. And so we would love to see you there and invite your friends. The more the merrier. They're free. And the Jewish world needs more people to know what you are learning. I want to thank Vickie again. I brought us in right on time at 11:30. It's a good little lesson for those of you running programming. Always try to end right when you tell your audience you're going to. You have been a great audience. We will see you at the next one.